Sir Iain Duncan Smith, former Work and Pension Secretary, former Tory leader and still MP, of course. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Good morning. I mean, we've just had a whole string of former MPs, such as former Prime Ministers, former Attorney Generals, even a former Chancellor, Sajid Javid, criticising the government for breaching international law by attempting to rewrite the withdrawal agreement agreed only last year with the EU. Lots of criticism that we're putting ourselves on the same par as Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, breaching international law. Do you think this is a significant issue, and are you worried about it?
Well, it's a significant issue. I will say, by the way, I'm the only one who was either an ex-leader or ex-Conservative Prime Minister that actually supported the government last night. So I wear that as a badge of honour in this particular respect, as I was also the only one of them that actually voted for Brexit. Anyway, moving on swiftly to answer your question, I think it is, of course, a serious issue because the government coming to this point, recognising the weaknesses within the treaty, some of us were warning them about that, and that was the reason why Clause 38 of the Withdrawal Act was put in there by many of us, and the government agreed, which makes a very clear statement saying, notwithstanding essentially anything inside this Act, nothing shall affect the right of the Parliament to establish its sovereignty and to make its laws relevant to the United Kingdom. And I think that's the key element that the government has decided to rely on in the process of changing the nature, potentially, of our relationship. And it's because the EU has, frankly, and this is absolutely clear as day, refused point blank to negotiate in a fair and reasonable way to cover these issues about how the UK would find it intolerable if they were not to grant third-party status to the UK in terms of goods, which would mean we'd cut off ourselves from Northern Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, this thing, a lot of them, again, for most of us who've got lives, children, jobs, people who are third-party status, people, what on earth is that? And this is basically the whole, we're not part of the EU, we're not one of the 28 member states, but we're given a special status. So they trade with, other countries around the world, but some countries are granted this status where there's sort of automatic approval. We know that your food standards are at a reasonable level, or the higher or same level, and therefore you can export foods to us as a given. Now, they know what our food standards are because we've been in the EU for the last 40 odd years, and we also have most of the time, and certainly right now, have higher food standards than many countries in the EU. For the EU to claim that this is a big concern for them, that we may one day change our food standards, and even if we did what everyone else would do, just notify the WTO and then change, and then the EU could accept or not accept. It's a total farce from them to pretend this is a genuine concern for them, isn't it?
Yeah, it's actually quite typical how the way by the EU behaves in negotiations. That's why pretty much every country that's negotiated with them ends up hating them in regard to this, and the WTO too finds. I mean, if you look at as regards breaking international law, the EU has a phenomenal track record of breaking international law. It's not implemented any of the WTO rulings, which are supposed to have direct effect. They simply brush them aside. The Germans have done much the same. The reality is we even already have failed to implement international law when we refused to give prisoners voting rights, quite rightly, because that was meant to be implemented without any debate or argument. So, we get a little bit hung up on this, and the public doesn't know what this is about. The truth is, the real point about this is, one, the EU is threatening to say to us, well, we might just say, no, you don't have the right to sell your goods because you won't have that status. And two, the big important internal matter is by doing that, they would force us to cut ourselves off from Northern Ireland with full tariff checks and regulatory checks between goods going between Ireland and the rest of GB. And of course, the Act of Union makes it absolutely clear that all of the parts of the United Kingdom can never have any tariffs or any regulatory barriers between them. So this would breach our very domestic and important vital constitutional laws. So the government's right to say to the EU, I tell you what's going to happen. If you decide not to negotiate properly and not to come to the Joint Committee and get rid of this threat, then we will have in our back pocket legislation which basically says this withdrawal agreement has simply failed and we're going our own way and goodbye to you. So that point is part of the negotiation, the government's right to do this. And I simply say to my colleagues, honestly, you have to trust the government to get on with this we need to tell the European Union they cannot go on trying to bully us. We are a sovereign nation now.
Okay, just finally, I want to ask you just about the front page of some of the papers today about this rule of six and the sort of the vagaries of this law, no birthday parties, but you can go grouse hunting, things like that, irritating a lot of people. Also calls for government ministers saying that, we should be effectively grassing on our neighbours, snitching on them if they have 7 people for a birthday party, their child, that they should dob them into the police. Would you do that?
No, not really, unless I saw something appalling. I went out and patrolled with the police the other night, late into the early hours of the morning, and there were a couple of incidents where there were maybe 100, 150 people revelling, silent discos, all that sort of stuff, very close to each other. Clearly that's not allowed, and the police need the powers to break that up if necessary. But, if somebody has, 7 people in their garden and you're peering out the window and you say, I'm going to report them to the police, I think this is where the problem comes. My sense all through this is, the honest truth is we go on doing this and then we bounce back, then we lock down again, and we need the economy to be moving, and we need people, most people, genuinely, the vast majority of people get it. And they are, the reason why we're not seeing huge hospital rises or deaths is because most people are already following common sense principles. We should trust the British public much more and lecture them a lot less. That's my general view. So,
Iain Duncan Smith, thank you very much indeed for that. We'll talk to Lord Hain in just a few moments. Bobby Freeman, just on that issue, dobbing neighbours, you're a lawyer yourself. Would you report on your neighbours? Would you think you'd have a quiet word? And would it depend on whether it's 7 people sitting in a garden or a house party for 80, everyone drunk at 3 a.m. and all over each other? Probably a different matter. But would you call the police?
Well, it depends which neighbours and how much I like them, I think, would be the first question.
But that's the fear, isn't it? That actually this is going to be a chance, as we saw actually during lockdown, some people sort of just reporting and claiming, their neighbours. I mean, people genuinely reporting, my neighbour's been out for a second walk today with their dog.
Yeah, I know, and people will use it as a great opportunity to get their own back. I wouldn't. If someone's got... as Iain Duncan Smith was saying there, if they've got 7 people sat in their garden, they're being broadly responsible, I'm not going to report them. I think, yes, if someone was having a genuine party with 40, 50 people there, then I think I would have a word and then might consider doing that, because I think that there's a difference between having some common sense and then someone doing something that clearly could actually really quite adversely affect people.
Yeah, again, I do think, but again, this is where it comes down to common sense, doesn't it? As opposed to perhaps enforcing the law, as Iain Duncan Smith just said. Then this is about just sort of trusting people, which the vast majority of us are obeying the law and doing the right thing, and being very sensible. I've been to a wedding since lockdown, and people were really, really sensible. Tables were all really spaced out, and just everyone just being really sensible about it. But there we are. More from Bobby Freeman throughout the show. Don't forget the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, will be on in just a few moments. First up, let's talk to Lord Peter Hain. He's a Labour peer. He's also former Northern Ireland Secretary. Good morning to you, Peter.
Morning, Julia.
Good morning. I must also point out, you're also author of a brand new thriller, The Rhino Conspiracy, which sounds very exciting. And I wonder if it involves exciting things like second readings of the internal market, Bill.
No, it doesn't. It involves...
It'll be a bestseller then.
Well, I hope so, but nice of you to mention it. It involves poaching and corruption at the top of it, political corruption in South Africa.
I was going to say,
it's a thriller about all of that.
I assumed it was about the EU, but no, there we are.
No. Published by Muswell Press, by the way.
Oh, right, so that's enough. That's enough.
Any of your listeners want to get it, they'll enjoy a good read.
Hey, let's get on to the serious issue of Britain apparently breaching international treaties and ruining our reputation around the world because of the internal market bill and the rewriting of the withdrawal agreement. The vote yesterday in the House of Commons won, as we've just been discussing with Sir Iain Duncan Smith, by a majority of 77. Another vote next week, again, very likely to be won by the government. Lots of finger wagging by former prime ministers and attorney generals and the like. But really, I mean, look, does any of this really matter in terms of our standing in the world?
Well, first of all, Julia, this is not about whether we Brexit or not. We are going to Brexit.
Well, no, we've already done that. Well, it was a great night.
Well, yeah, you and I have disagreed on it, but you won the argument.
Yes, but it did happen.
That's going through.
No, it's gone through. No, I hate to break it to you. We did it on the 31st of January.
Can you let me finish? Of course we did, but we're in a transition period, so we're still in practical terms, we're still in the EU until the end of the year. So that's over and done. The issue is what Britain's standing in the world is on international negotiations. Now, I've negotiated international treaties on nuclear non-proliferation in the United Nations, on stopping blood diamonds, and also, of course, the Good Friday Agreement was an international treaty. If you give your word and you sign an international treaty, as Boris Johnson did as Prime Minister on behalf of the UK last October with the EU, to withdraw Britain from the EU, and he did, and he signed up to all the detail in it, then you've got to stick to your word. Otherwise, nobody will do a deal with you in the future. So that's the point that I think that the 5 former Prime Ministers, from John Major all the way through to David Cameron and Theresa May, are saying.
But what about the argument that it's the EU that constantly reneges on deals, and even in their negotiations right now over a trade deal with the UK is in breach of the spirit of the withdrawal agreement, and in breach of the wording of Article 50 under the Lisbon Treaty, under which we exited the European Union, which requires negotiation towards a trade deal?
No, it's not. There are negotiations going on at the moment. Well, they're odd negotiations because we're hurtling up to the deadline and they don't seem to have been really substantive. What is at stake here? First of all, the Irish protocol that Boris Johnson signed up to, which was very important because it kept the Irish border open, and that's important, but the way it had to be done, and it was always going to be like this, is that the Northern Ireland needed to stay in the European Union Customs Union. Now, what it is doing is, so that keeps the Irish border open. So that's a good thing for peace in Northern Ireland, businesses and trade and so on. But that means that there's an issue of trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Now, obviously, everybody wants that to be as seamless as possible, but it is the external customs frontier, the Irish Sea now, of the European Union. And that's why there need to be checks and conceivably tariffs, though I hope not. But that's all detailed to be negotiated. Boris Johnson signed up to that. That's in the Irish protocol that Parliament voted through to withdraw Britain from Europe. Now, the detailed negotiations, and there's a lot of give and take in this. And there will be, because the European Union doesn't have any interest in there being overburdensome checks across the Irish Sea any more than Belfast or London does. So there's a deal to be done, but it is immeasurably harmed by saying we're not going to respect what we've already signed up to, which is what this internal market deal does. That breeds distrust. And if you're going to do a deal to resolve this Irish Sea thing, as we all want to see, then it requires trust on both sides. And for that, it takes 2 to tango on trust.
Well, it does.
And we're not doing that.
Do you accept, though, that the EU hasn't always been so trustworthy themselves in terms of their goodwill on these issues, but also so much of the coverage of this, the media coverage and the political debate on this, is this idea that, again, we're going to have a report to the front page of The Guardian today, this huge number of lorries that are going to be queuing up at Dover, and how can we possibly manage all of these checks? I mean, you and I both know that the vast majority of goods coming in and out of the EU from non-EU countries are not currently checked. There's an awful lot of it's just paperwork. A lot of it's sort of going through the motions.
Well, it's online.
It's online and it's spot checks and the like. And that actually
exactly.
An awful lot of the fear mongering, the scaremongering, which people use to try and stop Brexit from happening. We need to come together as a country now.
Brexit is going to happen. The issue is how does it happen in a way that is seamless, that causes the minimum disruption to business, which is in our interest. Half our trade is with the European Union, and it's in their interest. They want to sell BMWs and so on to us, as they have successfully been doing. So what is crucial at the moment is that a trade deal is struck. And for that to happen, there needs to be proper negotiation. I don't see, and from what I can gather, insiders tell me, there hasn't been much serious negotiation. Maybe what we're heading for, and maybe this is all part of a kind of a Boris Johnson stance, where he raises the temperature, as he did before last October, threatening no deal, and then actually does a deal at the last minute, and everybody thinks triumph, and he claims it as a triumph, though he's now reneging on it. Maybe it's that.
Okay.
Maybe there is a deal about to happen. Maybe it'll be a very thin deal and leave lots of ends are untied and things still loose. Well, whatever it is, this is not the way to go about it. Britain has a reputation for keeping its word, And if we break our word, nobody's going to respect us anymore.
Right, we shall wait and see. Lord Peter Hain, Labour Peer, former Northern Ireland Secretary, thank you very much for joining us.